Hi all, I'm gonna go get my lunch. Finish the quiz, or I'm a little late. If you haven't already, I'll be right back. If I don't kill myself. Sorry. I'm in terrible lighting in here. Hold on a sec.
Professor, so for some reason, the quiz like won't open on my computer. But I just,
Is it quiz? Check and see it. Make sure it's quiz 17, not 18.
yeah, it's definitely quiz 17. But I was gonna say, I just checked to see like how many points I have in like the bonus or whatever, and I have 3, so I'm good with just chilling.
And also like there'll be a chance to get another like 5 today, and 6 is full credit. So
okay, yeah. So
yeah, you don't have to use all 3 of those bonus points. Let's see if I can figure out how to get the lighting in here a little better. 3 more minutes. Yes, it's a little better. So you have like 2 more minutes. And then we're gonna have, I did get your chat message, Maddie. And then Kaylee's gonna present and then we'll talk a little bit more about it all the things. I'm like right in front of a window and the people are doing something in my apartment building with a giant tarp. It's unfortunate. All right, I'm gonna eat some things. Try to be human during this class. Okay. So if you are still taking the quiz, I probably has kicked you out. Welcome. This is I noticed this morning that the link was off. So we're supposed to be doing day 17 stuff. But until this morning it was linking you to day 18. I'm sorry if you did the wrong reading. I'll try to take that into account when it comes to quizzes and stuff. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So today, let me just kind of show you, and then Kaylee will take over. What you should have read for today, hopefully you did, was did women have a renaissance? And yeah, okay. What do you guys think? Were you able to read this one, or did you accidentally read Blazing World?
I accidentally read the other one, but you also told us that it was gonna be the Did Women Have a Renaissance? Thank you so much. Gonna be the Did Women Have a Renaissance one. So I was really confused.
Yeah, it was a bad link. Yeah. Oh well. So we'll talk about whether women had a renaissance. And if you did the reading for next time, that's cool. You did a little early. All right. So again, I apologize that I did not catch that earlier. Okay, sounds good. Tell her, sounds good, Crystal. Let me change this so Kaylee can share her screen.
Okay, can you guys hear me? All right, this is my first time, so if I mess up, sorry.
No worries.
Can you guys see that?
Mhm.
Okay, perfect. Yay, this is exciting. Okay, so while I was doing the reading, I was kind of confused, but then I wasn't. So, so just bear with me. So if I mess up, sorry. So my PowerPoint, let me put this away. My presentation was the women have a renaissance. That's 5. Oh, how do I do this? Oh, I clicked. Okay, so when did Renaissance begin? The Renaissance began in Italy during the 14th century, after the end of the Middle Ages, and reached its height in the 15th century, then was eventually spread to the rest of Europe in the 16th century and 17th century. So the whole point in the development was to affect women adversely. So there was no Renaissance for women, at least not during the Renaissance. Joan Kelly, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but Joan Kelly was an American historian who writes Italian Renaissance. She presents a feminist insight into women's role into society during the Renaissance. As Joan Kelly describes in this essay, I mess up with this word all the time, so don't make fun of me. Ferriguous, that's my mom. Ferriguous literature expressed the denial of female independence. Therefore,
Oh,
the Renaissance.
bourgeois. Okay, it's French. I was like, what word are you saying? Sorry.
I don't know, Ferriguous. I don't even know how to say that
It's
word.
a crazy French word. Like French
Oh.
had all kinds of vowels that it's bourgeois or
Oh my God, that's embarrassing.
don't
No
worry.
wonder, because last night I was reading this whole thing to my mom, and my mom's like, "What in the world is that word?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
It's a crazy word. Yeah. Basically, it means middle class.
Oh wow, it's embarrassing.
Don't worry.
So,
Not at all.
so bourgeois, or however you say it, literature expressed the denial of female independence. So therefore, the Renaissance set the norm of female dependency on the male figure. So men had to perform productive labor while women stayed at home to perform reproductive labor, such as household duties and childcare. So this essay was characterized by a number of developments in art, science, and culture, including the rise of humanism, the dawn of capitalism, and the development of modern states. So therefore, it would seem that everyone who lived in Europe during this period had a renaissance, in the sense that they were affected by the times in which they lived, most likely in positive and negative ways. The value, social expectations, and legal status and rights differed greatly between the sexes as well as among the classes. So men were able to explore the scientific and artistic sides of life simultaneously during the Renaissance. Women were discouraged to contribute to the art, science, and to participate in the sexual freedom men had. So due to the enforcement of celibacy and chastity, I think, the Renaissance was an artistic and literary movement. So the artwork and literature that was created during this time was to celebrate life, also emphasize female dependency and male domination. Was that too fast? Did you guys hear me? Can you
You're
guys hear
good.
me?
You're good.
Oh, okay, good.
You're good. Yeah. It was
Okay,
seemed good to me.
okay, perfect. So the characteristics of a Renaissance woman, I thought this was pretty messed up, but that's in my own opinion. So a Renaissance woman should be charming, not expected to seek fame, expected to inspire art, but rarely to create it. The upper class Renaissance women were better educated than medieval women. So women of higher class was perceived as equals to their suitors, and they were also overshadowed by their husbands. Most Renaissance women has little influence in politics. Lower class women could still work alongside their husbands, but if these women were to get married, they had to give up their education and perform the role of a good wife, which was always expected. So I wanted to include what do I think about it. And I think women did not have a Renaissance. If the only way women had a Renaissance was through men and being dependent on them, then really the men were the ones who had a Renaissance and who passed that advancements to their families. So women alone did not have the same advantages as men did. So therefore, in my own opinion, women do not have Renaissance. And these are my questions. Did the concept of courtship lead to true love, or was it all a social act? And the other was, what do you think or feel about this?
I think courtship in general, while it may not foster like actual love, it does lead to what's called performative love, where it's basically like you essentially trick yourself and your mind into feeling the same feelings of love because there's no other options.
I agree. So what do you guys feel about this though? What's in your own opinion?
It was just like a whole nother time in history where we raise up this era, like the whole Renaissance period as a great period of time, but it was only, the greatness only applied to a specific group of people.
Another instance in history of men being seen as the default, right? The experience of men as being seen as universal.
Right. And then I think after that, it was just my sources. Can you guys see that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not sure how to get out of this. So can someone?
I can help you.
You gotta, there you go.
Oh, okay, perfect.
All right. So today I will just Soli had trouble opening the quiz. Brett had trouble opening the quiz. So obviously something was messed up. You had trouble, Maddie? Yep. Okay. So why don't I open it up after? So like we're going to be going over the answers to all the quiz questions. So I'll open it up after as a kind of like afterwards thing. How's that? So if you should be able to take it later. Usually I don't like to do that because like I'm like, well, but they'll have all the answers, but like whatever. It's that point in the semester where I just all right. No, I don't want that. I just want to share my screen. Okay, here we go. Did women have a Renaissance? And I'm on, of course, the final slide. All right. Did women have a Renaissance? This is April 9th. So part of the reason why I assigned this, even though it's a difficult article, is because it's pretty genre breaking. So this essay kind of transformed not only the field of women's studies, but also Renaissance studies as a whole. Because of this essay, we really don't really call it Renaissance studies anymore. Now we call it early modern studies. And this is because she kind of showed that like this is when kind of like the modern kind of views of gender and gender roles started to emerge. And to call it like, anyway, so it was super, super, super influential. So it's worth kind of reading the original and talking about it. the essay was published in 1976. So right around kind of, the kind of rebirth of the feminist movement, kind of the move to kind of reclaim women's experiences and give more kind of attention to them. What does the term Renaissance mean? Do you guys know?
It's like just like an exhibition, not exhibition, that's the wrong word, but like a period where art and artistry is held at the highest level of appreciation.
Yeah. Renaissance literally means like rebirth and re-enlightenment. And so the idea to call this period the Renaissance is kind of, it means rebirth, it means enlightenment, to shed light into the darkness. All these kind of ideas are buried in the term. It's a period that people said was one of intellectual growth and greater equality and social mobility and stuff like that. In the essay, Gadol focuses a lot on Italy. We're focusing mostly on England in this course, but she kind of does help. Her insights are kind of applicable to the rest of Europe, and she looks at some English authors as well, okay, as well as Italian. So this is her thesis. In Kelly Gadol's opinion, women did not, as Kaylee said, did not have a Renaissance, did not have a rebirth, did not have a leveling of social distinctions or an experience of intellectual equality and discovery. So here's what she kind of says. It was precisely these modern developments that affected women adversely. So much so that there was no Renaissance for women, at least not during the Renaissance. The state, early capitalism, and the social relations formed by them impinged on the lives of Renaissance women in different ways, according to their different positions in society. But the startling fact is that women as a group, especially among the classes that dominated Italian urban life, experienced a contraction of social and personal options that men of their classes either did not, as was the case with the bourgeoisie, or did not experience as markedly as was the case with nobility. So basically what she's saying is like, Renaissance was really only available to men, and women actually experienced a contraction or a lessening or a kind of limitation of their political, economic, and social freedoms. Okay. So Kelly Gadol is looking at this and kind of evaluating this according to 4 criteria. The first is she wants to compare. So basically she wants to compare Renaissance women with the women who came before, medieval women. And she compares them according to the relegation of female sexuality. So how free were women allowed to be sexually? Women's economic and political roles, or their economic and political agency, which is another word for power. Women's cultural roles and agency in shaping their society, and ideology about women as portrayed in literature, art, and philosophy. Okay, so like those are her kind of the 4 kinds of things she's looking at. How we talk about women's sexuality, how we talk about women's, ability to determine culture, their political agency, and how they're represented in art. Okay. Her ultimate thesis is that they get less and less freedom as time goes on. She has, she's looking at all these different things. She's looking at history as well as art, as well as politics, as well as sexuality. It's a complex project, looking at not only blah, 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 literary and philosophical representations. She discovers, and she makes a compelling argument that women were in an inferior position, not only in comparison to male contemporaries. So women in the Renaissance had less rights than men, but also that they actually had fewer rights than women who were living a couple generations before them, the medieval women. So suppose that the supposed Dark Ages or medieval period was actually way more enlightened when it came to gender equality than the Renaissance or than the Enlightened period, right? So she's kind of making like a surprising claim. All right, take a few minutes and I want you to write in 17.1, what is the medieval period? What do you know about the medieval period? What comes to mind when you hear the term medieval? If you're not sure about any of it, you can do some quick internet research, but like, what is the medieval period? Okay, because a lot of her essay is like compare and contrast early modern to medieval. So we need to get a sense of what is the medieval period. I'm going to grab a glass of water and see what my child is screaming about, and I'll be right back. Take like 2 more minutes. Good, good. Okay, like 1 more minute. Yeah. So you guys, what you're thinking of when you think of like knights and, you know, adventuring and swords and stuff like that and armor, this is all legit. You're totally right. This is all medieval. So that is exactly what you should picture. That's perfect. So let's see. So the medieval period, I like this picture because it shows the castle, right? So you have a medieval castle. And then over here you have kind of like nobles, and then you have kind of peasants working the land, right? Also called serfs. It's a feudalist society. And I know I've talked about this before. Sorry to kind of beat a dead horse, but yeah. It is what it is. All right. So it's from around 500, as a bunch of you said, the fall of the Roman Empire, to about, 1500. So almost a thousand years. Uh, Characteristics is it's very heavily Christian. And Catholic, generally. There is no Protestantism at this time. It was all kind of Catholic. It was run by the Pope. People didn't really think of themselves as kind of split into different nations. They thought of themselves as a nation of Christians, part of the Christian nation. There's a really interesting book called Imagined Communities, where someone says, like, in the early modern movement, that's kind of the first time that we have like thinking about like the development or the birth of like the idea of nation and nation state, and like us as American rather than us as like Christian. Yeah. Feudalism was the dominant political structure. Feudalism have like, peasants, and then there's knights, and the knights protect and serve a lord and stuff like that. Okay. As Charles mentioned in his post, there were Vikings running around, lots of kind of warfare, tribal kind of warfare, I think, I can't remember who mentioned it, but there's plague. Someone mentioned it in her post. And also during this time, there was the Crusades. So like knights running around in kind of the Middle East, trying to reclaim Jerusalem and the Holy Land and stuff like that. Okay. During the actual Middle Ages or medieval period, it wasn't called the Middle Ages. It wasn't called the medieval period, of course. They didn't think of themselves as medieval, especially because like if someone's being very medieval, like, what do you think? Like, there's an expression like that, like she went medieval on him or something like that. What does medieval kind of connotate in that kind of usage? What do you think? Have you ever heard anyone say something like that?
Doesn't it mean like to like freak out on someone basically?
Yeah. It's kind of like barbaric, right? It's kind of like equivalent to like kind of like barbaric, or like savage. It's equated with like torture, like medieval torture. Renaissance scholars are the ones that kind of named it that, the medieval period, or the Dark Ages. They also called it the Dark Ages to distinguish themselves from it. And they kind of wanted to say like the Dark Ages were when learning and reading and intellectualism was abandoned to be ruled by spirituality and superstition. And they wanted to like contrast what came before with their new era of what they thought was enlightenment, discovery, reason, stuff like that. Okay. And like people keep doing this throughout history. So like people are always looking at the people who came before them and be like, oh, they're so barbaric, they're so like dumb, they're so uneducated, blah, blah, blah. Okay. So tell me a little bit about medieval women's sexuality. So this is kind of thinking about what Gadol is saying. During the Middle Ages, remember the supposed Dark Ages, they had a specific kind of literature. It's like basically like the movies or the television of the day. It's their primary form of entertainment and most popular. It's called troubadour poetry. And in troubadour poetry, like, what do you think of when you think of medieval literature? What stories do you think of? If you think of knights and you think, armor.
Knights of the Round Table and King Arthur and stuff.
King Arthur, exactly. Good. Yes, yes. So King Arthur is perhaps the most popular. And what's going on between King Arthur and what's the biggest, most well-known story about King Arthur? There's Arthur and his wife is.
It's the Sword and the Stone.
Okay, all right. I forgot about that one. Yes, he does do the Sword of the Stone and the Lady of the Lake, and he's the true king, the one's the future king, and all that good stuff. What I was remembering is Guinevere and Lancelot. What happens between Arthur, Guinevere, and Lancelot? Do you guys know? I don't know. Do you know?
They didn't really teach us this.
Okay, okay. I wasn't sure. Like, it was a big part of like I don't know. There's a famous movie about it when I was growing up, but I'm okay. So the idea is that Arthur's queen is called Guinevere. And even though she's married to Arthur, she hooks up with Lancelot, Arthur's best knight. Okay. And this causes lots of drama and the eventual kind of fall of Arthur's kingdom. Okay. So there's usually in medieval kind of women, in medieval society, women are kind of expected or it's allowed for women to kind of find consensual heterosexual love, usually outside of marriage with a knight. So adultery is like not really a big deal. Like women are kind of like it's in all the stories. It's almost like expected. And granted, this is only for high class women. Like peasant women don't get this kind of same agency, but like courtly women who are in the courts, they're kind of allowed to kind of go outside marriage and have, consensual sexual relationships with men who are not their husbands. There is no pressure, to be chaste or to be faithful. Adultery is just kind of a fact of life for these women, if not kind of romanticized and idealized. The kind of relationship between men and women is consensual. It's based in love. That was later, Crystal. We've inherited that from the Renaissance. So I remember what I told you that. Yeah, I did tell you that. That's just the first time. That's just the first time. After they're married, they're allowed to kind of go outside the marriage. Yeah. Women were not really expected to take too much care of children during this time, at least in kind of the poetry. And illegitimate children were not necessarily a bad thing. They actually helped to strengthen alliances. We can really see this in the poetry of Marie de France. And we're going to read actually a little bit of her stuff. First, I'm going to just kind of go through this a little bit quickly. The political and economic role of medieval women is that the women ran the courts. They were oftentimes powerful rulers in their own right. Think Eleanor of Aquitaine, Marie de Champagne. They could separate from their king or ruler husbands and still retain power. So they also had the power to kind of shape the culture they were in. They created literature, they played major roles in the literature, they were fully realized individuals in the literature. And part of the reason they were able to do this, according to Kelly Gadol, is because they had power in other spheres. Okay. All right, so we're gonna read Chevrefoil, which is a lay, which is basically like a fairy tale, adventure story, narrative poem. And I want you to kind of, as we read this, what are the roles of men and women in this poem, and does anything surprise you about it? So it's about Tristan and Isolde. This is Tristan, this is Isolde. It's a similar kind of story to Arthur and Guinevere. Okay. Well, all right. All right. Do you guys want to read it together? Read it on your own. There is a link to it it's only 5 pages and it's not even a whole page. But what do you think? Poor Maddie keeps getting kicked off. How about you guys take 5 minutes and read it and then we'll talk about it. Okay. So go to discussion 17.2, open Chevrofoil and give it a read and see what pops out at you, what surprised you, what are the roles of men and women. Okay.
Wait, it was the poems, right?
Oh, I'm a liar. I think it's 17.3. Oh shit. Yep. It's 17.3. I'm a mess today, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
This is a mess, but we're still gonna do a good job. But like, oh my gosh. Yes, it's 17.3. It looks like this. Looks like this. Okay. So it says, it's my pleasure and I want truly for the laymen call Chevrofoil to tell the truth, why it was made, how it all befell. More than one has told me or spoken. I found it also written about the love, about the queen and Sir Tristram, their love so pure, so true, from which there followed sorrows multiplied. Then in a single day both died. Okay. So read the next couple pages of that. King Mark is Tristan's older brother and also the queen's husband. Okay, what kind of struck you? What surprises you? This is 17.3 again. What is the role of men and women in this poem? What's the portrayal of love? Did anything surprise you? How does it illustrate the points from Gadol's essay?
I didn't even finish it, but I really liked one line where it says, but he's ready to risk it all, death, destruction, any downfall. Don't be too surprised, really. Any true love who loves loyally suffers, and depression haunts him when he can't have what he wants.
Yeah. So the idea is here, like men are expected to be true and faithful to their female loves, right? Does this make sense? Like men are expected in a way to be chaste. And this is why it throws modern readers to think about Guion is one of the King Arthur's knights, and he's the knight of chastity. And people are always like, chastity is a woman thing, but in the medieval period, it wasn't. It was totally different than what we've inherited from the early moderns, for instance. So the situation is the Queen and Tristan love each other. She's though married to the brother of Tristan. It's one of the greatest Western love stories. And it's like a love story between a married woman and, the little brother of her husband. It's a serious love triangle, right? This is the line that I think this is the line that you were talking about. Yeah, don't be too surprised. That Crystal was talking about. So he's been banished because he loves the queen, and the king knows it. But he kind of sneaks in and kind of gives her a secret signal, right? Like it's like a like sign in the tree that means, it means honeysuckle. It's like there's a signal of their love, and she sees it. She was riding through the woods for this holiday, and she sees it, and so she wants to dismount and take a rest. She wanders alone into the woods. She leaves the path, and then she finds that man who loves her more than any other. They show their joy to be together. So like basically the idea is like they have sex in the woods, and then like she talks to him about how to get in with his like brother better again. Does this make sense? Yeah. And then they're really sad to leave each other. But basically because she helped him, he is able to kind of get back in his brother's good graces. So like kind of like it's interesting because in this story the husband totally knows they're hooking up, and he's like sort of mad, but like not that mad, right? Like there's no challenges, there's no duels to the death. He just kind of like is like, leave for a while, and he's like, but I miss my little brother. She even says like she outlines every little thing needed to make peace with the king, for it weighs heavy on her husband thus to have sent him far from the land. Make sense? So like in this way, kind of like as Gadol points out, extramarital affairs, not that big of a deal, and romanticized and maybe even expected. And like women are almost expected to be unfaithful to their husbands in this kind of culture. This of course does kind of hide the fact that like women have no choice over who their husbands are. And so like marriage is more political, but you are still like allowed and encouraged to kind of find love outside of marriage and to be true to your beloved rather than to your spouse. Okay, does that make sense to people? Yeah, tried to get you anyway, if you take World Lit 1 with me next semester, we'll do a whole week on Marie de France and her lays, and this will become more clear. So Kelly Gadol's argument is that women were able to have freedom, or even maybe a better word is agency, in sexuality, economics, and politics and art in the Middle Ages, but that all of this changed in the Renaissance. She focuses in particular on the Italian Renaissance, and she looks at some historical women, but her points are compelling because they extend to all areas of Europe. So in this section, she talks about politics and culture first, and then literature. And in the other one, she talked about literature, then politics and culture. Anyway, so Renaissance politics. What were Renaissance politics like? So she's focusing on Italy, but so in the Renaissance, like there's like Machiavelli, wrote The Prince, Stuff like that. What do you think? What do you know about it? See, art is obviously very different, right? So like,
There was more.
go ahead,
Sorry.
go ahead, Maddie.
There was obviously a lot more religious contention, which made its way up through politics.
Yes, yes, yes. As we know from last class, right? So there was a lot more kind of like a focus on the individual, right? Which is kind of illustrated in religion. The feudal system is disappearing. Do you know what's taking its place? The
The
economic
caste system, or
close. Feudal system was more like caste system. What's taking its place is capitalism, which is why we have the emerging bourgeoisie, or, you know, as we prefer to say, middle class. Emerging capitalist system, or even despotic rule in Italy. There are a few military standouts or heroic women in Italy, but mostly women did not have direct access to political power. She says the access was indirect and provisional. There's no longer aristocrats and serfs, but now a new middle class. And so they are kind of like, the middle class is starting to define like how women there differ from like the nobility. So this is also coupled with less and less kind of political and cultural capital for women. In court, women no longer really kind of contributed to the discussions. They only moderated them. Access to power, indirect and provisional. They were shut out of formal education. So during like the Renaissance, like one of the reasons it's kind of thought of as a kind of period of enlightenment is because like education was a lot more available to everyone. Like the medieval period, like even knights and kings weren't really expected to be literate. But during this period, a lot more people are learning to read and to write. They're reading Aristotle, they're reading in Latin, they're reading, you know, philosophy, you know, all these things. But women were shut out of formal education. And cultural authority in this period really belonged much more to humanist educated men rather than women. So in a lot of ways, back in the medieval period, women kind of made culture and men made war. So women made art and men kind of made war. And in this period, it kind of men do it all, and women become shut out, or they only get to observe. In art, women also have a different portrayal. A lot of women were discouraged from making art, unlike in the Renaissance when it was allowed. Dante and Petrarch were kind of the big deal literary figures of the Renaissance, the early Renaissance. The focus of their poetry had shifted to just love independent of politics. And like in their kind of sonnet sequences to ladies, like they use a love of a lady as a step toward universal beauty, like an understanding of universal beauty or the ideal of love. The Renaissance lady herself is not desired. She's not loved. She's just kind of used as a kind of stepping stone to kind of allow the man to kind of access a more universal platonic idea of love. And there's no sex for either men or women. You know, it's more about a meeting of the minds, or like using your love for a woman to kind of better your own mind. John Donne actually really satirizes this in his poems, The Flea and The Bait. And so I was going to show you the guys those poems. Let's go get out there so you can really see it here. John Donne's poetry is very good. We already read his one poem. It's horribly small. Let's see. We already read his one poem. He kind of talks about like To My America, or is it To His Mistress Going to Bed. is the one we read. So let's read the flea. Anyone want to read the first stanza?
I can do it.
Awesome. Thanks, Crystal.
Is it line 10?
No, right from the beginning.
Oh, sorry, the names are covering it.
Yeah.
Mark with this flea and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is me. It sucked first, and now it sucks thee. And in this flea our two bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said, a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, alas, is more than we would do.
So he's talking about like, look at this flea. Look, it sucked my blood and now it's sucking your blood. And look, in this flea, there's a kind of union of the bodies. It's like he's satirizing. Basically, he's like, look, that in this flea's body, we're basically like becoming one. Might as well do it in person. Anyone want to read the next stanza?
I can do it.
Awesome, thank you.
Oh, stay 3 lives in one flea spare, where we almost nay more than married are. This flea is you and I in this, our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge and you, we are met, and cloistered in these living walls of jet, though yous make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege 3 sins in killing 3.
So he's like, don't kill that flea. You know, you'll be killing our marriage. You know, in that flea, like we're united. We're closer than in marriage. And then she like kills the flea. He says, cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphs and sayest that thou findest not thyself nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true, then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor when thou yieldst to me will waste as this flea's death took from thee. He's basically like, you know, might as well have sex. So Donne's love poems, this is blah 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 blah. It's Donne's own. The insect afforded a popular erotic theme for poets all over Europe, deriving from a pseudo-Ovidian medieval poem in which a lover envies the flea for the liberties it takes with its mistress's body. So basically he's kind of like, look, you know, we might as well, you know, have sex rather, because we're like united in this. Probably the bait is a better one. Let me look at the bait. The undertaking, sun rising, indifferent, canonization, songs, air and angels, break of day, the bait. Okay. All right. Anyone wanna? Here, let me see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7. I bet we could have everyone who hasn't read yet read a stanza. Yeah?
I'll do the first one.
All right, Brett, go for it.
Come live with me and be my love. We will some new pleasures prove of golden sands and crystal brooks with silken lines and silver hooks.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Brett. Sorry, I was reading a chat thing. Okay, Charles.
There will the river whispering run, won by thine eyes more than the sun. And there the enamored fish will stay, begging themselves that they may betray. Yeesh.
Good. So like basically he's like, come live with me. We're gonna sit on the bank of a river and it's gonna be totally idyllic and stuff like that. Anyone want to take over? How about Abby?
Sorry.
No worries.
When thou wilt swim in that live bath, each fish which every channel hath will amorously to thee swim, gladder to catch thee than thou him.
Even the fish want to catch you, right? Because you're so sexy. Victoria.
If thou to be seen, beast loath by sun or moon, thou darkenest both, and if myself have leave to see, I need not their light having thee.
Here he's like making fun of a common Renaissance idea, which is like the women are like the sun or the moon. We saw this also in Shakespeare's poetry, right? Like my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. Good. Let's see. How about Kaylee? Let others freeze.
Okay. Let others freeze with angling reeds and cut their legs with shells and weeds. Or treat treacherously, poor, right? I said that right?
Yep.
Okay. Poor fish, beset with strangling, snare, or windowy net.
So basically he's like, other people will fish badly. How about Andrew? Like coarse, bold hands.
Let coarse bold hands from slimy nest the bedded fish in banks outrest. Our curious trader sleeve silk flies bewitch poor fish's wandering eyes.
Awesome. And how about Amber? For thee.
For thee thou needest no such deceit, for thou thyself art thine own bait. That fish that is not catched thereby, alas, is wiser far than I.
So he's basically like, anything you do, you're gonna catch me. And so like he's kind of like he's making fun of people who kind of overly kind of romanticize women. He's making fun of like this idea that like because it's the reason he's kind of making fun of it is because it's such an unsexy image for both of them, the flea and the fishes, like, and like fishing in general. Like he's kind of saying like he's making fun of people who are like, this woman, she is my bright shining star, she's an angel, she helps me discover what is real, what is true, what is love, like, and I do this really not by touching her, but just by imagining her in my brain. Dunn's like, she's a person, a flea will bite her. She's got sexual desire too. I'm basically a fish for her. I don't know how well that worked, but anyway, okay, yeah. So the focus of poetry for a lot of these guys has shifted. And Renaissance women's sexualities during this time, women were rendered much more passive and chaste. Children's legitimacy is super important. You're not supposed to have children by anyone but your husband. You're not supposed to have sex with anyone but your husband, okay? Which placed men in the public sphere and the patrician woman in the home. And then there becomes a link between love and marriage. Sexual love now can only occur in marriage. It's a new regulation of female sexuality. Women become just vessels for children, and it's not about women's sexual pleasure or agency or choice anymore. Let's look at the Mary Roth poem from discussion 17.2. So Mary Roth was a really, really fascinating figure. She was the niece of two poets, Philip Sidney and Mary Sidney, very famous poets during the time. So she was the niece of those two. What am I doing? And so she herself became a bit of a writer. She wrote a sonnet sequence herself, kind of making fun of Petrarch and his kind of role of women. And then she wrote this epic kind of prose romance, and she published it, which included thinly veiled episodes and characters taken from her own life at court. So she wrote and published this story that, like, if you were in the know, you kind of recognized, who was who. And this really pissed off this one guy, Sir Edward Denny. And so he wrote this poem to her. And I kind of wanted to read it to you. All right. All right, so this is what he wrote to her. I kind of want to know what you think. Hermaphrodite in show, indeed a monster, as by thy words and works all men conster. Thy wrathful spite conceived an idle book, brought forth a fool, which like thy dam doth look. Wherein thou strikes at some man's noble blood, of kin to thine, if thine be counted good, whose vain comparison, for want of wit, takes up the oyster shell to play with it. Yet common oysters such as thine gape wide, and take in pearls or worse at every tide. Both friend and foe to thee are even alike. Thy wit runs mad, not caring who it strike. These slanderous flying flames rise from the pot, for potted wits inflamed are raging hot. How easy were it to pay thee with thine own, returning that which thou thyself hast thrown. And write 1,000 lies of thee at least, and by thy lines describe a drunken beast. This were no more to thee than thou hast done, a third but of thine own which thou hast spun, but by which thou plainly seest in thine own glass how easy 'tis to bring a lie to pass. For thus hast thou made thyself a lying wonder. Fools and their babbles seldom part asunder. Work of the works, leave idle books alone, for wise and worthier women have written none. All right, what is he saying here in this poem? What are some of the things that kind of jump out at you? Anything? It's like this first couple lines, right? He's saying like, you wrote a book and that makes you a hermaphrodite in show. So you look like a messed up, like you look messed up in terms of gender, and indeed you're a monster. So this is basically what he's saying to her.
Kind of feels very complaining.
It's an attack, right? It's an attack poem for sure. But like the attack is really interesting in the form it takes. Like he kind of like is like, you know, like you're kind of like acting outside your nature or the nature of your sex. Like he equates kind of like women with, you know, silence, right? They need to be silent if they're true women. And if they're not silent, or if they write a book, you know, they're kind of monstrous, right? He says, brought forth a fool. The book is the fool, and it looks like its mother or writer. So she looks foolish. She looks like hermaphrodite. She looks like a monster. She's confusing. She like is dumb, whose vain comparison for want of wit takes up the oyster shell to play with it. This is a sexual reference, right? Do you guys know that oysters are often kind of symbolic of female genitalia, right? He says like, common oysters such as thine gape wide and take in pearls or worse at every tide. So he's basically like, you know, also your slut, right? And you know, your vagina is like so huge it sucks in stuff, all like friend or foe, and then casts it out, right? So he's also making a link between like her chastity and her sexuality, as well as her, you know, voice and her kind of decision to publish a book. And also like he's also mad because like she wrote about an episode where he like overreacted and tried to beat his daughter because of a rumor that she slept with someone not her husband. So like this whole thing is like an illustration of how expectations for women have changed in the Renaissance based, you know, when compared to the medieval period, right? He calls her lies. You know, he says, you know, a third here, like, look, he says, like, thus hast thou made thyself a lying wonder. Like everyone looks at you and is staring at you, and they all know what a liar you are. Fools and their babbles seldom part asunder. Also, you just embarrassed yourself by publishing. Work of the works, leave idle books alone, for wise and worthier women have written none. And so basically he's like, women belong in the home, not kind of writing. And this kind of also goes along with what we talked about last class when it goes, what are the virtues for women during the Renaissance period that are emerging? Remember, men get fortitude, courage, justice, temperance. Women get chastity and silence and obedience, right? Okay. So take a few minutes and kind of what elements do you notice that support either the material you read for today, which is people's view of women during the Renaissance, or ideas discussed in last class having to do with chastity, silence, and obedience? Okay. A few minutes and do that. And if you're curious, she wrote back to him and basically put him in his place, but she didn't actually, even though she wrote back to him and stood up for herself, she never did end up publishing the second half of her romance, maybe in part because of this public shaming that she had to undergo. Okay. All right, so I'm basically out of time. Try to complete discussions 17.1, 2, and 3 sometime before next class. Also, I gave you an extra 24 hours to complete the reading quiz. So if it wasn't working for you, it should work now, hopefully. And yeah, you have till noon tomorrow to complete it. I can't believe I don't have your midterms for you today. I promise. I'm promising. I flaked. I forgot all about them. I'm so close to being done, but I forgot about them. So sorry. But I will have them for you soon. Okay. All right. Have a great weekend. Looks like you have an analytic response to do. Soft deadline, okay? Because I haven't gotten you your midterms back and within 2 weeks, I'm not gonna penalize you if they're a little late, okay? All right, so if you need to take till Sunday or Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, fine, that's fine, okay? All right. Bye,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Professor.
Thanks, Professor. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.